A Harvard-trained neurosurgeon's brain was completely shut down, and what he experienced goes against all scientific knowledge. Dr. Eben Alexander was a neurosurgeon, a man of science, logic, and reason, and for years he dismissed near-death experiences as just merely the brain misfiring under stress. But in 2008, everything changed. Dr. Alexander contracted a rare and deadly bacterial meningitis. Within hours, his brain was completely shut down. He fell into a deep coma, and the part of his brain called the neocortex, which is the part that creates thought, emotion, consciousness, ceased functioning. There were actual EEGs done on his brain to prove this. That part of the brain was completely shut off. And according to current medical understanding, what he should have been experiencing during that time was absolute nothing. The part of the brain that creates those things was shut off. So he should have been experiencing nothing. But what he experienced, he says, is everything. So before we go on, I want to make sure I make one thing clear. I am not sure if this is real or not real. I just think it's interesting. As human beings, we're fascinated with what happens after we die, and hearing stories like this is truly fascinating. So during this time when Dr. Eben Alexander was lying in this hospital bed with basically no brain activity, he says he was experiencing somewhere else, some other realm. And this is how he describes it. He said he found himself in a place full of joy and peace and like rich, radiant colors. In his book, Proof of Heaven, he calls this place the gateway realm. In this realm, he says he felt like he was flying or soaring over like lush green countryside with waterfalls and beautiful colors and flowers and crystal clear water. He said the air shimmered with what he would call like divine light. He said there he encountered a beautiful woman. Now, at the time, he said he did not find her familiar or recognize her, but I am going to get back to that later in the story, so remember that. She had no wings, but also appeared to be like flying or soaring with him, and he said that she exuded peace and love and ancient wisdom. He then said that she said to him, "You are loved, you are cherished, you have nothing to fear, and you can do no wrong." He also said these messages were not heard through the ears or spoken, they were just sort of told to each other telepathically. Now, from this realm, he said he entered into another realm called the core. He said this realm felt even deeper than the other one. He said this felt like it was the heart of the divine, the infinite, the eternal, the unchanging. He said there was no up, there was no down, no time, no space, only infinite, boundless love is what he was experiencing. He then encountered a bright orb of light with the most beautiful music he has ever heard. Nothing like this earth could produce. He said it's even hard to articulate what it sounded like because it was just something so different. The main thing he said is that it brought him to even more deeper and deeper peace. So even though he didn't fully understand what was happening, where he was, what all of this was, it didn't feel scary because it was so peaceful. So even though it sounds, even to me, hearing it kind of sounds like almost too trippy, he said it didn't feel like that. It was just constant feelings of peace and love and harmony and goodness. He says he then encountered what he calls the creator, the ultimate, the infinite, this all-loving presence. But it wasn't a figure, it was like a force. And he got the overwhelming sense of home. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but in the other video I did about a near-death experience, that's the same thing she felt. Many people with near-death experiences express this feeling like home. He said that the creator said to him, "You are part of the one. You always have been and you always will be." Now, the part of the book, because I did read this book, that I love the most is him talking about this like vast being as like the creator. Instead of it being a figure, it was more like a force, like he said, right? And at first, to me, that sounds a little impersonal and it sounds like too hard to grasp. But he also says in the book that although this like thing felt all-encompassing and massive, he could still tell that the creator knew him intimately and personally. So it still felt super, super personal, which I particularly love that and can relate to that a lot. Despite him being in bliss, he was still gently told that he could not stay here, it was not his time, and he still had more purpose on Earth. He said he returned back to his hospital bed by passing through the realms. The woman that he encountered before still helped him kind of pass through back to his body here on Earth. But before he did wake up, he said that she gave him one final look. Then darkness, then waking up in his hospital room. And after 7 days in a coma with no brain activity, he essentially just woke up. The doctors were astounded, and he made a full recovery, which is basically miraculous. And not only did he survive, he was able to maintain and retain all the things he experienced while he was in that coma. So as he was recovering, he knew he was a changed man. He knew the science and the logic and the reason that he once held so dear was now basically completely changed. He essentially had no brain activity, the part of the brain that he contributed to making memories, making images, having creativity and emotions was essentially shut off. Yet he still experienced this whole beautiful world that felt more real than he ever could. He couldn't explain that. He couldn't explain that. And he knew what he experienced was more real than ever. So he started believing that consciousness exists out of the brain. Now, most people in science believe that consciousness stems from the brain. And now he's saying, no, I think we have a brain, and I think consciousness can exist outside of it. So now back to the woman that he saw in his near-death experience. Months later, while he was trying to recover and kind of make sense of everything he experienced, he got a letter and pictures in the mail. Now, Dr. Eben Alexander was adopted. This letter was from his birth family who he never knew and never met. In these pictures was a picture of the woman he saw in his near-death experience. It was one of his sisters who had already died. He didn't know he had sisters, and he definitely didn't know he had a sister that died. His other sibling sent him this letter with pictures of the family, and here was a picture of his sister. Her name was Betsy. Betsy had already died years prior, which he had no idea, and that was the woman that was in his near-death experience. That was the woman who was taking him around the different realms. His sister Betsy. So this revelation hit him like a wave, he said. It just solidified everything that he experienced. It made it more real for him that here was this person that he so clearly remembers in his near-death experience. He says he remembers her eyes, her smile, her beautiful skin. And then here was this picture that someone that he had never known, his birth family, had just sent him. So it was a real solidifying moment for him that this was real. He did really experience this. Now, amazing as that story is, I love it. I love it. It rings true for me. I loved his book. I still like to hear what the critics say, right? This was years ago, and his book has been out for years. So there has been time for other people to criticize, what he is saying. So let's also look at that. So some neurologists would say his brain may not have been as inactive as he claims. They suggest that residual brain function can be occurring, which could cause dreamlike states or hallucinations. Also, the timeline of the near-death experience. Time is a strange and movable concept, right? Maybe this near-death experience happened seconds before he woke up from the coma, right? Maybe all of that happened within those moments right before he woke up. It's really hard to say when exactly he was experiencing this near-death experience in time, because it can happen all within a few moments right before he woke up. So generally speaking, the main criticism is there's a lot of unknowns. The brain could have been still somewhat active, so it's really hard to know if the brain was truly, quote unquote, shut down. Now, of course, Dr. Eben Alexander has heard his critics and has always tried to rebuttal, saying, it is what it is. We have EEGs proving that my brain function was literally shut down. The parts of the brain that cause hallucinations, that would cause things like this to happen, was fully shut down, fully quote unquote dead. So what he experienced goes against science. So of course he's going to get a lot of criticism. He says he's trying to break out of the norm, and people don't like that. People don't like the unknown and the unexplainable. At the core, Dr. Eben Alexander now believes that our consciousness does exist outside of our brains, and that death is merely the beginning of another phase in life. Leave a comment about your thoughts on near-death experiences.